welcome to Curiosity Unleashed and our time sweep conversation this week. We have already gone way deep into a very interesting kind of conversation there. Um, our theme this week is Trust is Magic, or this month. And yeah, Richard, I don't know where we're going to pick up from that, um, but maybe around the concept of the shifts happening in the world. I mean, there is a lot of shifts in a sense of division, not just politically or whatever words you want to use, but also in choice, in what reality we choose, what input we choose. Yes. What do you think around a divide, I suppose?
Well, as we talked, and many songs talk about 2025 being the Great Divide, and we're looking, well, it's 2026, but I think there was a massive divide for those who are choosing a level of connectivity of consciousness and those who are choosing to become siloed and into their division I would call it avoidance, like not that, not that, not that, not that, and so we become the more you try and avoid or say not, I don't want to be like them. I think that the more it isolates you. I think it's a pattern that's creeps into your being, and we see it in the entrepreneur level. I don't want to be like them, but again, what's your other choice?
Yeah.
And I mentioned a lot of times people are looking at, the old values through the NLP world of clan, tribal, but and it's as lower values, but in there is connectivity. My personal opinion is there's such a connectivity of consciousness and
Yeah.
and heart centeredness in that. And as we've lived in Mexico now 4 years, coming from Canada, we have seen the difference in the sense of there's the connectivity, the values here are, no one is left alone.
Mm.
Their family values are strong, like family-run businesses, and they come in, and as we come in as customers and clients, they greet us with heart-centered, warmness because we're buying their product, and so there's graciousness, when someone, and it's a small thing, but when you go buy a product for someone, it's a vegetable or a cup of coffee, and they come to you and they smile because they're really happy you're there.
Yeah.
That's a lost gift of connectivity, and there's countless stories of that surfacing now. People coming to stores and where a store clerk has been putting notes out, and whether they're made up or not, but it's the people are not saying, but over the months later, they come back and I've saved all these notes you gave me on my bill, like have a good day or things like that. And
Oh,
it's
wow.
it's this
Yeah.
powerful connection of a smile or a greeting or someone saying greeting you by name and asking how are you, and they damn well mean it.
Yeah.
We're so-called supposed to be lower values, and I think it's a misdirection of energy because we're here to connect as human beings. No matter you have electronics or not, we're here to sit and have coffees and share our lives. And this is our longevity. This is our humanness of animals connect,
Mm.
and they hang around in groups and they play and we're getting thinking that we're going to just be sitting in our rooms being fed AI all day, being educated, but we'll be so isolated, we'll be completely useless.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to go back to this point you're making around tribe and clan. Have this feeling of, especially talking to people in Northern America, that there's been a demonization of this concept of clan or tribe, as to it's the us and them, and yet there is for me, and talk about it often, so much more value, so much more connection, and so much more acceptance of diversity within that concept. In my understanding, my view of this concept, and there's a simplicity, and I think that for me is the biggest thing that we or our children might get to miss out on is this simple living of sitting and having coffee, of cooking dinner together, of taking 24 hours to make a sourdough bread, of making a fire, and everybody knows how to make the fire, and we know that we'll be sitting around it, and telling stories or, even just sitting around it and being together, um, which is gone missing within this concept of community for me, because community feels more isolated. And I know it's words, um, but it's also like a feeling behind words. I mean, that is what they are there to communicate. Um, and you were saying earlier about you seeing it where you're living in Mexico, where there is, you know, divides between communities, and then I wonder what we see as our community, isn't this what is rallying people up as to these people that are coming in, or those people that are doing this, or, you know, um, what is our community? What is our tribe? Tribe feels like I can choose it, but community feels like I'm being forced in there because of the neighborhood I live in or whatever it is.
Well, there's a lot of influence into how they want you to feel about these words. And I think you said like tribe, they think, oh, and they always want to point to some like people living in grass huts in Africa, or
Yeah,
people living
I
in a
like it.
lower quality life. And there's a movie that came out, was released in 2012 called The Economics of Happiness. Look it up on YouTube or Rumble. It's an absolutely beautiful movie. Talks about it. The woman who was, I think, a Swedish social archaeologist, I believe, and she spent 30 years in Tibet and watching the people, their values, their community, their local identities. Like you said, no one was left alone.
Mm,
They were, and oh, well, they were just poor, happy people. But it's not about being poor. They had everything they needed. We've been so consumed with technology and our phones and thinking, and we have to have all these 19 devices and that. And yet the simplicity in the community where you're seen every day, you're recognized every day, you're valued every day for who you are. And there's a lot of accountability in there because when something's wrong, people gather together to help them. And
yeah.
I'm going to say the word community in the sense of when, there's people cooking, they all cook together. You learn as a child to cook, you learn responsibility, you learn skills,
Mm,
and there's in truth, there's a huge vitality in that.
yeah.
And that we don't have that in our so-called techno society. We are so conditioned to our phones and trying to get likes on our phone or trying to get some sort of identification, we lose our
Engagement.
own identity. We lose our own ability to validate ourselves. It's all been externalized.
Mm,
And it's like you go to school or you work for a place for a long time, and you walk in the building and you've got a good relationship. And when 5, 10, 15 people say hello by name to you and it's genuine.
yeah.
I mean, I had that with 30 years at Honda. There's so many people that were there. I could walk through the building and say hi to 25 or 30 people and you don't realize what that does to your physiology
Yeah.
and your emotional acceptance of something to say good morning and people, and it's just the genuineness of it. And we take that for granted, but for many people, like there's no conversation going on.
Yeah.
Zero recognition. You're going through check AI like self checkouts. There's nobody there to talk to you, and you don't realize how suffocating that is to your emotions, your mental
Mm,
wellness, your vitality, and it's like that's what we're heading towards.
yeah. Yeah. And we live in this era where, you know, it shows in our health, it shows
Mhm.
in the
Oh,
amount of people with dementia or and it's such a physiologically, because we've lost that connection, not just to each other. I mean, you and I walk past each other, we make eye contact, we greet each other. There's a certain area of our brains that light up, which
yeah.
creates strength. There's neural pathways that build and form. I remember in 2009, we went on a road trip to Swaziland and we went to Mozambique, and we were driving through Mozambique, and it was this beautiful, around all the huts, that it was so clean, and the women, were always sweeping. It was just so beautiful, idyllic country. And I was so confused. I mean, I was an adult as to how we are classifying these people as poor, because the kids are running around outside. They don't have fancy clothes on. They don't have, most likely don't have TVs in their houses, but they're laughing and they are playing and they are animals and they cook together and the gogo is there and the grandmothers and everybody, there's a sense of belonging and I'm being
Yeah.
seen. When I'm not, when I'm not getting out of bed today, someone's going to come and look for me,
Mhm.
where in our, uh, what do you call it? No, our successful lives, we are sitting alone in a flat in New York and we've now made it, but there's no one that comes, there's no one that greets me hello in the morning unless it's
Yeah.
Alexa or I was even walking past or driving in the road, yeah, in Ashbourne the other day, and I was in a what do you call it? Traffic lights. I was sitting in the traffic and I just looked to the side. The sun was shining, and there's this little kid with a Meta thing on playing inside on their own. And I was, it must be great fun if you're that age. But yeah, the sun doesn't shine a lot in the UK. So yeah. So is that kid now richer than the little kids running around in Mozambique where they can pick fruit off the trees next to their house and there's community in the real sense of community, or is this child who there's probably nothing wrong in this, but just in my vision of that
Yeah.
moment, being alone in this house in virtual reality. Yeah, so also what do we choose?
We see it here in the children's expression. They're loud, they're boisterous, they laugh, and they're even amongst the parents talking, and there's a high volume, but the parents are still talking. The kids are playing very physically, very viscerally, and but what we see too is young groups will sit there. And I remember in Morelia, young high school kids sitting there along this one walkway singing.
Oh wow,
I don't
amazing.
recall
Yeah,
people in North America singing. I mean, you walk here, like the parks are full at most of the time, but to have these, there was a dozen high school kids or whatever sitting there singing this song. And then we
yeah,
were at an Airbnb there some couple years ago, and some evenings, the group of the teens would sit outside their apartment and sing. So
yeah,
it's again, this connectivity, this visceral effect, and every day they recognize each other. Every day you see the men greet. They don't just look at each other. They have a very greeting protocol,
yeah,
and they're looking at each other.
yeah,
How are you?
yeah,
Mucho gusto, right? And there's uh, it's like when someone you haven't seen for a long time and they come up and they give you this big bear hug.
yeah,
It's the most, to me, the most enriching thing I could ever have.
yeah,
And that we crave physical contact, we crave physical connection, and sitting there and it's being eroded away into this so-called isolation or this elitism, and we're dying. We,
yeah,
we will die from this, and we'll just decay into this amoeba if we don't have this ability to connect and talk and share and sit together and break bread.
yeah, yeah. And that's where the divide is, I think. It's between the ones that are seeing this and going, you know, I choose to do this. There can be balance, there can be
Mhm. Mhm.
equilibrium, but there still needs to be choice because everything else is manufactured for us to be distracted from that
Yeah.
connection. I mean, it's been shown even in science. The heart has an electromagnetic field that is much stronger than that of the brain, and we need that connections with each other. Our bodies produce oxytocin when we have that hug, or we are designed as a group. We're a group animal, however much we don't need to conform to be in that group. That's the thing, I think, for me, the difference between the tribe and the community. is that I don't need to conform to be in part of the tribe because I can be it's a global thing. There are no gatekeepers, you know, it's not my skin color or my language or my um interest or my profession or my bank account or my car or anything that puts me into that tribe. I'm in it already and I'm being seen in it as an individual. I think that's a big part of identity that we've lost in this world that we've created. You know, when we were living in those simpler times as clans and tribes, the rest of the tribe would attribute you with what they see in you. They would go, "Oh, Richard is someone that can." Communicate well, and therefore, or Richard loves looking after animals, therefore he is going, you know, so it's literally being seen as a individual, as a um yeah, n not just a cog in the wheel. My son's favorite argument these days is he doesn't want to go to school because school's made for factory workers and he's not intending to be a factory worker. So yeah, um, yeah,
Just to inject something, you said something very powerful. You said the community contributes to you.
mm,
They contribute their value perspective to you. And I think that's a very powerful, we just don't, this is something to focus on because, you know, when they said, yes, they give you roles and stuff, and it may always what you want, but it may not always be what you want to do. However, it's still a role that has incredible value. And
yeah,
perhaps they recognize your values of your external capacities to do something, to maybe be a teacher, to maybe be a leader, to be a a woodworker, whatever,
mm,
because it gives you validation, but it also says this is what we believe in you, and they tell you this. So you're not looking for it because what our society does, it always tells you you're not enough. We grew up, most of us
exactly.
grew up, we're not enough. And we're given this external comparison. Well, I'm not like them, I'm not like them. And it's all, excuse
Mhm.
my French, fucking bullshit. It's pure
Yeah.
fucking bullshit.
Yeah. But
Because
we are so indoctrinated with it. Our
yeah,
marketing is based on it. Our news is based on it. Our
yeah,
everything's based on the fact that you are not enough and
yeah,
you need even our school system. I mean, not that it's a surprise, but I say it like it's a surprise. But you get a badge if you do this thing, or you get a certificate, or you get a, you know, it's
yeah,
all external. And then the primary school my kids went to, it's like how many badges you can wear on your blazer. And it's all bullshit, you know?
yeah.
Yeah, it's just because you followed the
The
conformist
rules.
way. Yes. I don't want to say rules. So conform, you know,
Yeah.
because I don't like rules unless they make sense. Then we agree on them. But a lot of these rules that we've inherited makes no sense and they're only there for control. So I don't consent.
I agree because you're right. Community has this, I'm going to call levels of distinction in it, and here's,
Mm,
and it always has hierarchy, right? So in there, unknowingly, there's a lot of exclusiveness, not inclusiveness.
yeah.
Tribal clan, as we're again deemed lower values, to me, I see such strength in that because it's inclusive. And
Hmm.
again, it's more contributory. Everybody contributes, and
Yeah.
so you're not a director, you're not this, it's like you're not anything other. In fact, you contribute, and again, people recognize your values and recognize you for those values. So you're seen and heard. Like when I maybe didn't have the recognition at home, but when I working for neighbors, I was valued for them. It's just a difference. Like most people, they recognize, they contributed to me, they acknowledged me, they asked me things that, at home it was a different level. And for most of us, like somebody said, how should you treat your family? And the guy said, treat them like strangers. And he said, what do
Yeah.
you mean? He said, you'll bitch at your family and demonize them, but a neighbor walks in the house and you're greeting him like he's your best friend. How's it going?
Yeah.
So I said, if we take our opinions away of our families, thinking not enough, and looking at it like the neighbors, we have a different valuation suddenly of our own children.
Yeah.
Because, we think, oh, we're trying to get them to behave. And yet the neighbor goes, oh, yeah, your kids they were so awesome. They were really
Yeah.
had good manners. And you're like, oh, thank God. But I have to beat them. I have to beat them senseless here at home to make sure they don't screw up. And it's
Yeah.
bullshit.
It is. It really is.
It,
Um,
it's, it's,
yeah.
it's,
Because
so
once again, if there was connection, you don't need to beat anything into someone that that is connected.
true, true. You don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's how you raise your children. It's how we raised, our children. It wasn't about force. It was about consistency and valuation of being seen and heard and recognition, and just
Yeah.
that consistency of who we were
Yeah.
as adults. What is our behavior? And so many people have contradictory behaviors and kids see it all, right? So it's
Mm.
who are we? And I always say we're boring people, but I was the same person out there as I am at home. They saw that. I said the same things. I didn't talk about people behind their back. I didn't
Yeah.
make up stories. We were just consistency. To me, that gave the kids such strength of themselves because they understood who they were with that consistency.
Mm. And
And
that's trust, isn't it?
yeah, they trust
Yeah.
themselves. They trust us. They trust they trust their choices because they saw the
Mm.
consistency out there. And I mean, I saw people's lives unfold in 30 years with Han, and I, the guys that were steady and guys and gals that were steady had pretty, formative, structured kids. Like people that were shit disturbers and troublemakers had troublemaker and shit disturber kids.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And that is because that it not only because it's a learned behavior, but also because it is where they find validation. So
yeah,
yeah, and that creates the trust or mistrust, because
hmm
if you behave like this with strangers, but you behave like this with me, then I can't trust you, which
yeah,
creates um a a dilemma, like a internal um clash, isn't it? Who am
yep,
I? My identity isn't formed because I can't trust my parents, who are my first, but
yeah.
then I also can't trust my teachers, and I also can't trust religion or,
Mhm.
the government, or so I'm actually alone. And once again, I'm now isolated because there's no connection.
There's another series out there you can find it somewhere, and it's a four-part series called "Predict My Future."
Oh yeah.
And that's that New Zealand study that was, and it's just looking at that, the four types and how that whole formative, childhood formative stuff was so critical to their life flow. And,
Yeah.
they could just say, okay, this is what, so it's learning. So we're so-called calling ourselves an advanced society, but the more advanced we become, the more isolated we become, the
Hmm.
more helpless we become because we're so dependent upon something else. And yet when you have the group accountability and social responsibility makes a huge difference in your inner resilience,
Mm.
and inner accountability. And when people not only hold you accountable, but also support you. I mean, I know how for so much of my external world was so, I knew the rules at home, but my external world was so good validation because I did good things. And then when I screwed up, I was honest about it and people supported me. Yep. Okay, let's go. Let's
Yeah.
fix this. Right. Like I say this in a joke, but my accountability was so strong at home that if I screwed up outside or broke something at home, and I'd always go to the boss and they said I messed this up. No one got mad.
Yeah.
They said, let's fix it because they've all done it. Everybody, and you made a mistake. And I think that's a term that's been so demonized. You failed. And those terms have been so accentuated of learning is failing, making mistake, like not doing something correctly. It isn't a failure. It's a learning structure.
Yeah.
So making mistakes or something, or it's a learning structure. If you weave that through the four stages of competence, it's how we learn. It's how we improve. Somebody said, if I wish you ill, it would be you did something and did it right the first time because you'd never know how you did it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you look at the athletes that were hardworking became the good coaches because they understood all the nuances. There's a natural athlete. Well, he doesn't know how to translate his natural skills into as someone who's struggling. And so we learn by our processes and steps and stages, and this is how we help and support others. That's how I support others because I've been, been through this journey, and I know the steps. I know the pain struggles. I know the trip ups, and if I hadn't experienced that, I couldn't divulge that information or that structure to someone else because it's not in my being.
Yeah. Yeah. But you can trust yourself to be able to move through your process,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
and know that you'll come out the other side, you know.
Correct. Because I did go through those stages. I
Yeah.
did go through those steps. I did have, things that I couldn't do right and had to take some time to learn how to. And that's a life skill. So it's getting back to trust is huge. Learning to trust ourselves that we can go out the door and do with something, to do something, pick up something, trust myself and my choices of how I connect with people, how I engage with people, to ask questions, and that's been minimalized us in so many ways. We can't trust ourselves. You have to rely upon something external to give me information. No,
And yet, yeah, sorry.
yeah, no, please,
And yet we have this built-in sensors in
yeah.
our body that can help us with this, but we've been um, separated from those as well. I mean, in the Wisdom Seekers, our theme is trust, but we're also looking at the solar plexus as a chakra around this month. And I mean, that's your gut, isn't it? Your gut is the thing that can signal these things to you. And yeah, I think that is a place or a skill or a power that we have forgotten about a lot within society, in that we have these internal sensors that need attunement, because I think in a lot of aspects in the world today, we are realizing that we might have been trusting the wrong things because we
Mhm.
were believing instead of listening to ourselves.
Yeah, there's so much energy in the body. I read something that's not, it's certainly not scientific, but 80% information the brain receives is from the body.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
call it the inner proprioception, and
Mhm.
so much of that whatever you call it, energy or physiology, is that sensory, is that awareness when we're connecting or feeling or sensation lies what's going around, and how animals connect to us. Some animals will, dogs will walk up to certain people, some they won't, and so it's learning to again feel this human energy field we're in, and this, and to energize that, to trust that, trust our thoughts, trust our own choices, and have the flexibility there. And it's such a magical feeling for those. I don't myself do a lot, but meditation, how they connect to our field energy, how we connect to our senses and thoughts, and live our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Through embodied experience instead of
Mm.
head. It's all in the head, and I think that's where we've lost this simplicity of connection, and to trust that process.
Well,
Um, yeah.
it's like a framework I've created, the embodied alchemy framework of how I'm working with people. It's a coaching model I have, right? So again, getting all those senses involved
Mm.
and connecting to them so you can live your life. And because I mean, we are struggling globally to have relationships with people, and they're talking about here in North America that they say 50% of women in the next, 5 years won't have partners. So that's a scary, lonely space to be in for so many people, that are,
Yeah.
to try and, you get the point, why am I even here?
Yeah.
What is this even, what am I here for? Because this, isn't what I thought it would be.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank
So
you.
Yeah, I was
It's
going to say, yeah,
we're gonna go
yes.
into a time sweep, I think. So I'm gonna
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. Okay.
end it here, and I'll put the link to the time sweeps below. And I think we might have another conversation around trust. I think it's a really, really
Huge.
huge topic, especially in these times. Yes, and it affects us physiologically and psychologically.
Mhm.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay.